What's good? It's Woog. I want to talk a little bit about SHAKUR Stevenson's pretty dominant decision win over Robson CONCEICAO by the official scores of 118 to 108, 117 to 109, and 117 to 109. So the judges basically gave 1 or 2 rounds to Robson CONCEICAO, and there was a knockdown for SHAKUR Stevenson in this fight. There was also a point taken away from SHAKUR Stevenson when he kept repeatedly hip tossing CONCEICAO when CONCEICAO would do a lot of holding, especially in the middle rounds. So I want to start with the fact that SHAKUR Stevenson missed weight by like 1.5 pounds, right? And so there was a part of the fight purse that was deducted from Stevenson to then pay over to CONCEICAO. So the way that the purses broke down was Stevenson was to make about $3 million for the fight, and CONCEICAO was supposed to make, I believe, $250,000 for the fight. So after Stevenson missed weight, CONCEICAO had the option of not fighting at all and still taking his whole $250,000 purse. Like, he could have done that. But instead, he went forward with the fight. Stevenson ended up paying, I believe, $150,000 from his purse to CONCEICAO. So CONCEICAO, instead of making about $250,000, makes about $400,000. Let me know if your numbers are different on that one. But, you know, it begged the question for me, the professional or lack of professionalism aspect aside. I mean, SHAKUR Stevenson up until now has been totally professional, and he has been one of the most scintillating and just most impressive and most respected young talents in the game. I mean, he's like in his early 20s still and has become a unified champion at 130 and had a belt at 126 when he won a vacant title against Joet Gonzalez. But at 130, he basically beat the other best fighter in the division in Oscar Valdez. So Stevenson lost both his WBC and WBO belts on the scale the day before this fight against CONCEICAO. But it begs the question on whether that purse exchange is equitable. When you look at what CONCEICAO stood to gain and then stood to lose, and how much him working off that last 10 or 15 pounds in the weight cut, while SHAKUR Stevenson doesn't have to do the same or chooses not to do the same, what kind of a competitive advantage that gives SHAKUR Stevenson. Now, I'm not here to say that if they both continue to sweat down and make weight, or if CONCEICAO didn't do the weight cut, that CONCEICAO wins the fight or that it's a much closer fight. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that as it stands, this was not a fair fight because one person had to do that extra work to cut the weight and the other didn't, period. With that said, when you get into the actual fight, the first 2 rounds were actually kind of interesting. Like, I was watching this with my brother, and I asked the question, all right, if you had to bet, who throws the first jab to the body? And because both of these guys are sweet scientists. SHAKUR Stevenson, Olympic silver medalist. Robson CONCEICAO, Olympic gold medalist. And we saw in the first few rounds of CONCEICAO versus Valdez, or should I say Valdez versus CONCEICAO, how skilled CONCEICAO is and how quick his punches could come and how defensive he could be. And, I was just curious to see what kind of challenges he would present to Stevenson that Stevenson would have to overcome. So in the first couple of rounds, first of all, it was CONCEICAO being the first to jab to the body, and he landed it. And it looked like he was actually counterpunching pretty effectively, and it was apparent very early that he did have the height advantage. He had the reach advantage. So it looked like SHAKUR Stevenson was going to have to find a way to close the gap, to land effectively, not get countered hard, and basically do something to separate himself from his opponent in his hometown, his being Stevenson's hometown of Newark, New Jersey. There's often a lot of added pressure when you're fighting to your home audience. So I was wondering if that was going to play any part and if Stevenson was going to do too much pressing here. Well, after those 2 rounds where Stevenson ended up, kind of walking CONCEICAO down and hitting repeatedly to the body, and then he started landing more cleanly. Yes, he was still eating a few shots coming in, and we're not used to seeing SHAKUR Stevenson get hit at all. So once somebody who barely ever gets hit gets touched up a little bit, people start saying ooh, ooh, and they start kind of recalibrating their opinion of the fighter. And it doesn't even have to be as dramatic as when Devin Haney got clipped by Jorge Linares. I'm just saying Shakur Stevenson eating headshots wasn't something that we were used to. And yes, he did roll with a lot of them. And yes, he does have superior footwork to where his distance and range control on the drop of a dime, he's able to come in with like a jab or even a power punch and basically close the gap, close the distance on a taller, longer fighter, get the punch off, and still bounce back out before the counter even comes. That is pretty remarkable. But he did do some things to start adjusting, and after the first 2 rounds where, you could have given CONCEICAO one or maybe even both of those first 2 rounds. I wouldn't give him both. I would give him 1 out of the 2, probably round 1. But after round 2, it felt like Shakur Stevenson was more or less in control. I mean, he wasn't like totally dominating every round beyond that point, but it seemed like he was more or less winning every round beyond that point. Yes, there was the round where he got the point taken away, and there was another round where you could arguably give it to CONCEICAO. But aside from that, Shakur Stevenson basically won like 9 or 10 rounds in this fight against a super high quality fighter. So, kudos to Stevenson, even though, again, I don't see this as being a totally fair fight just in terms of how that weight thing went down. But performance-wise, yeah, Shakur Stevenson, like, I don't know about y'all, and if you guys adjust Stevenson's, abilities and how you view him, whether it increases your opinion of him or decreases your opinion of him, for me, it increases it. Because here's another thing. No, he didn't get the stoppage, and yes, he was clearly pushing for the stoppage. Again, I think that the home crowd made him want to get the stoppage, right? You want to look very impressive. But so he was coming forward a lot, throwing power punches. But when you're fighting a guy who kind of has their mind made up where they are more so in survival mode, not to say that CONCEICAO wasn't still, giving it a good effort. I mean, to even get out of a few of those rounds where he was getting just blasted to the body, and you could see it start to have an effect where he started clinching repeatedly and then just moving side to side, just not trying to get hit to the body anymore or not trying to get caught in exchanges. Once Stevenson totally had a beat on him and was, basically the quicker fighter and the first to let the power punch go, like Stevenson was trying to move forward on him, be able to lead with the power punch and make the counter miss. And when you've got a guy who's looking to move, kind of avoid, and then maybe ambush with 1 shot at a time, yes, you're going to eat a punch every now and then, which, again, Shakur Stevenson would eat a punch out every now and then. But the vast majority of the time, it was Stevenson who was able to get off first, or he was able to move forward, feint CONCEICAO out of position, and then throw the punch. So you could either lead with your punch, or you could feint, get a reaction, then throw the punch. But it's hard to finish somebody like that when they are as defensively crafty and, still pretty dangerous. No, CONCEICAO's not like a knockout artist, but he was throwing pretty hard when he was throwing. Not as hard as Shakur Stevenson, who also doesn't have the reputation of a knockout puncher, but he does obviously have some pop. I mean, he had Oscar Valdez's respect. He clearly had CONCEICAO's respect. And he dropped CONCEICAO, and it was to the body where there was a delayed reaction. He caught him. CONCEICAO was kind of coming in for a clinch and then kind of fell forward to his knees. Like, he was hurt a few times at the hands of Shakur Stevenson. So, in my opinion, his stock grows. Even though he lost his titles on the scale, he's now about to go to 135, which, that's its own discussion. We'll talk a little bit about that. But, yeah, I thought this was a very impressive performance, especially given, again, the challenges that CONCEICAO was presenting in those first couple of rounds. If you want to see what a relatively neutralized or a Shakur Stevenson who hasn't yet figured it out against this particular opponent, go watch those first 2 rounds. You know how, Floyd Mayweather notoriously computes the data, and then by round 3, he more or less has things figured out and he's kind of in cruise control in a lot of his fights. Shakur Stevenson has some of those same attributes where he's able to make those, in-flight adjustments, usually within a couple of rounds, to where he's got things under control by the 3rd or 4th round, sometimes even sooner. But this one, it took him a round or 2 to kind of, get things figured out versus CONCEICAO. So, yeah, go rewatch, especially those first couple of rounds if you want to see that version of Shakur Stevenson and see how he methodically navigates those waters and then takes control of the fight. It's pretty remarkable. But yeah, it was going to be very hard to get that stoppage, especially when CONCEICAO had his mind made up that, no, I'm not going to let this guy stop me. Anything but a stoppage here. I got that type of impression based on CONCEICAO's, fight style from, let's say, like the 4th or 5th round on. And yes, he did have a few moments here and there, and some of those exchanges were still pretty interesting, but Shakur Stevenson won the vast majority of the round. So now he's about to go to 135. Again, he's no longer a belt holder at 130. He wants to fight Devin Haney, the undisputed champ at lightweight. He wants to fight Lomachenko, but it looks like once Haney has the rematch against Kambosos, if Devin Haney wins that fight, which, I mean, a lot of people are just like overly assuming. They're already talking like future plans, which you kind of have to be careful about in a sport like boxing or like MMA. You can't really make those types of plans until the fight plays out. Yes, I think that Devin Haney is going to beat Kambosos in the rematch. I'm going to do a preview on that fight as we near the fight date. But you can never be too sure about these things. And, Lomachenko is going to be returning to the ring for the first time in nearly a year since he had those two 2021 fights against Nakatani and ended up brutalizing Nakatani. And then against Richard Comey, well, that Richard Comey fight, I believe, was in December of 2021. So Lomachenko is going to return to the ring like 10 or 11 months later. And he's going to be fighting a pretty good, lightweight in Jermaine Ortiz. He's the guy who retired Jamel Herring. Pretty young, athletic, pretty skilled fighter, so you never know with these things. Yes, you would assume that Lomachenko will do enough to win that fight, but assuming that Haney and Lomachenko win their respective fights, it looks like it's going to be them two who are going to be fighting for that, undisputed match. And I think that is the important fight that needs to happen. As much as I would love to see Shakur Stevenson against Lomachenko, I'd love to see Shakur Stevenson against Devin Haney, I feel like the business that needs to be had is just tying up the loose ends of, Devin Haney and basically the guy who's seen to be the gold standard of the era, essentially, at lightweight, Vasily Lomachenko, at least in the current to past era. Yes, there's the new crop of guys, which a couple of them are already moving to 140, it seems. Teofimo Lopez is at 140, and then Ryan Garcia appears to be moving to 140. Devin Haney is on borrowed time at 135 too. He's a very big lightweight, so it's only a matter of time. This fight against Kambosos might end up being his last lightweight fight. We'll see how the weight goes and what his plans are and how comfortably he's able to make lightweight. But he's going to be at 140 in no time. So Shakur Stevenson is just about to storm the gates at lightweight. And as much as I would love to see him fight either of those two guys, I just feel like Devin Haney, even though he is the undisputed champ at lightweight, and yes, he was displeased with not being ranked in the top 10 pound for pound by Ring Magazine, you got to also realize that, yes, Devin Haney has had a spotless career. He's won all of his fights. He's beaten Jorge Linares, Joseph Jojo Diaz, and even that win against Zaur Abdullayev is aging well. Abdullayev just stopped Jorge Linares earlier this year. And so Devin Haney has like some good wins, but his path to becoming undisputed, it wasn't like he beat this guy and took that belt, beat this guy and took that belt, beat this guy. He didn't do that. He beat one guy, George Kambosos, who's not even seen as an A-level elite fighter. Like, he beat him and collected all of the belts. So essentially, Lomachenko kind of did the legwork to earn those belts and to consolidate like at least 3 of the 4. You could argue 4 out of the 4, even though one of those became the franchise belt, right? So then Devin Haney held the actual title, but it was Lomachenko who grabbed the belt from this guy, then grabbed the belt from this guy, and then one guy, Teofimo Lopez, beat him, took all of those. Kambosos then beat Teofimo Lopez, took all of those, and then, Devin Haney beat George Kambosos and took all of those. So I feel like there's like a decreased level of accomplishment with each one of those wins. Now, granted, Devin Haney was under immense pressure having a fight out in Melbourne, Australia, where you could look at the scorecards. Given the fight that we saw between Haney and Kambosos, look at those scorecards and tell me that there wasn't at least some home cooking there. Imagine if that was actually a close fight. Devin Haney probably loses via decision if the fight even looks close. So he had to perform his butt off to come home with those belts, and he did so. I'm just saying he did it against George Kambosos, not against Lomachenko, and not even against Teofimo Lopez. So Yes, Devin Haney is the man at lightweight with all the belts, but I feel like a win over Lomachenko would be that kingmaker performance in the same way that, Anthony Joshua wasn't the man after he collected a belt beating Charles Martin. He was the man, or at least arguably the man, after he had his king-making performance against, the longtime best of the heavyweights in Vladimir Klitschko. So I think that this is a very important fight for Devin Haney just to kind of clean things up and to really just stamp your legacy at lightweight before moving up to 140. But yeah, Shakur Stevenson, it's going to be interesting to see how they matchmake with him, given the idea that Haney and Lomachenko might be busy for the next, half a year to a year or something like that. But yeah, let me know what you thought about Shakur Stevenson versus CONCEICAO. What do you think Shakur Stevenson's first fights at lightweight should be? I'm thinking, Nakatani's been kind of busy lately. He fought in Japan. He won that fight, and that was a fight since getting brutalized by Lomachenko. And then Nakatani has a fight scheduled, I think, for early November. So he's about to fight. So maybe if he wins that one, maybe Shakur Stevenson versus Nakatani at 135 might be a good, baptism into the lightweight division for Shakur Stevenson. So I assume he's going to have a lot of success there. He's looking like he's inevitably a pound-for-pound talent. Some people already have him in their top 10 pound for pound. By the way, if Devin Haney does beat Lomachenko, then he won't have anything to worry about in terms of his placement in the pound for pound rankings. But yeah, I'm assuming Shakur Stevenson's going to have a ton of success at lightweight, but you can never totally be certain of these things. But let me know what you thought about the fight between Stevenson and CONCEICAO, and what do you think his path at lightweight looks like, also given the promotional politics and who's on top rank versus who's not. Let me know what you think, and please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.